All right, guys, today we're going to take a look at graphing a linear inequality. As you can see in the upper right-hand corner, I've got kind of an example laid out for us of what an inequality would look like. This one reads y is less than x minus 5. And so we're going to go ahead and graph this on the xy axis here. So a couple things with this before I jump in. There's some definite background knowledge you're going to have. One, in order to graph inequalities, you really need to know how to graph linear equations, which I have a video you can check out on that if you're a little unsure on how to do that, because a lot of this stuff is going to carry over. So the first thing you're going to do, you're going to look at your inequality, and you kind of have a three-step process that you're going to go through. And the first step of that is going to be that you're going to determine where your line is going to be. And you're going to do that using your knowledge of how to graph a linear equation. And so looking at this inequality, it's y is less than x minus 5. So the line that you're looking for is going to be located at y equals x minus 5. And I just changed my sign there for purposes of determining that line. And so knowing that that's in slope-intercept form, my y-intercept, where this crosses the y-axis, is going to be at negative 5. And so I'm going to go ahead and plot that on my axis right there. And then my slope is the understood 1 that's being multiplied by the x there. And so its rise over run is 1 over 1. And so I could count up 1 and right 1 to locate those points like this. And so this tells me the location of my line. Now here's where things get a little bit different with inequalities. If this was just an equation, I would go ahead and connect my dots, put my arrows, and be done with it. But with inequalities, one of the things that I have to consider is I have to look at whether the line should actually be a solid line, like normal ones with equations, or if it should be a dashed line. And so what I'm doing is I'm actually looking at my inequality sign. If my inequality sign is less than or greater than, and it doesn't have the equal to part with it, then it's going to be a dashed line. And so in this case, that's exactly what I've got. And so rather than make this a solid line, I'm going to make this a line with dashes on it, like this right here. I'm still going to put my arrows to reflect that this line is infinite, and it goes this direction. Like I said, if this happened to have this or equal to part as part of the inequality, then it would be a solid line. But in this case, it does not. So moving back, that's kind of the first major step, is to get your line on the graph. The next part of inequalities is that we understand that the line itself is not the solutions in this case. It's actually a whole bunch of points on one side of the line or the other that are actually solutions for this inequality. And so the next step is to shade this. And I've actually heard this taught a couple of different ways, or kind of explained a couple of different ways. So I'm going to try and address both of those. The inequality says y is less than x minus 5. And so if you have a pretty good understanding of what that means in this inequality, you would understand that where your y is going to be less than this line, well, they're going to be less than below this line. So you could shade that way. I prefer a little bit more of a systematic approach. And here's what I'll do. I will actually pick a point somewhere on my graph. So in this case, I could pick the point 0, 0, which of course is the origin. And instead of just kind of guessing or going off of the sign, I will go ahead and plug that x and y coordinate into my inequality and see if it's a solution. And so in this case, you take 0 is less than 0 minus 5. 0 is less than negative 5, and that's not true. And so what that tells me is all the points on the side with 0, 0 are not solutions. And so if those are not solutions, that means this other side is full of solutions. And so I would shade everything on this side of my line to reflect that these are my solutions to this inequality.